I'm going to start by explaining what I mean by the word listening, because it's a little more involved for conductors. The crucial and complicated thing about listening as a conductor as opposed to a soloist is that we need to be listening in two different ways simultaneously. We need to hear what is actually happening in the room, the quality of the sound, the intonation, whether people are really playing or singing together, the balance of dynamics between the parts, where singers are placing consonants, etc. But we also need to hear in our inner, imaginative ear how the score should actually sound. The most important part of our job is to keep those two sounds, the actual and the conceptual, balanced in our awareness, and to monitor how far the actual sounds from the humans in front of us deviate from the conceptual ones. To really be effective, we need to develop both types of hearing, our inner ear and our outer one. Sit at your instrument, or the piano, with a multi-part piece like a string trio, SATB choir piece, or even something like a simple movement from a Haydn symphony. Play as many of the parts as you can, bearing in mind in the symphony there'll be a lot of doubling that you can bypass, but sing one of the parts. Once you feel comfortable singing that part against the ones you're playing, switch. Just sing them in your own register, the harmony will still work. Find a recording of a piece that you're not particularly familiar with. Listen to the recording without your instrument and dictate as much of the detail as you can. You might need an instrument to work out the initial notes to get you started, if, like me, you don't have perfect pitch. It might be that you can dictate the melody and a few notes from the bass line, or you might even find that eventually you can add more detail from counter melodies, internal harmonic notes, and perhaps even rhythmic or textural detail. Choose an orchestral piece that you can follow with a score. Pick 3 markedly different recordings and do a really detailed phrase-by-phrase comparison. Over which beat of the bar exactly does each recording begin a crescendo or diminuendo? At the peak of a phrase, how exactly do the different recordings change the timbre? Can you hear more vibrato in one of them? Is there any fluctuation in tempo? What sort of attack does the sound have at the loudest peak or on an accent? Which of these variations most closely resembles what you see written in the score? With all of these ideas, you can increase the complexity of the music you're dealing with to really challenge yourself. But if you're finding it tricky, just remember you can always go back to the absolute basics. Single line sight reading, basic melodic and rhythmic dictation, and harmony and cadence recognition. If it's something you find really difficult, start with a single scale, using the scale degrees instead of note names. Find or write some simple melodies that stay within the octave and don't modulate. Place the scale degree number underneath the notes and then sing the melody while naming the scale degree. Once that feels comfortable, try doing it again but without writing the scale degrees in. Next, write a string of numbers between 1 and 8. Pick a note that represents 1, lowish in your voice, and then sing the melody back that comes out of the numbers you've written down. 5, 3, 4, 2, 6, 7, 8, 5, 3, 1. Repeat the same string of numbers, but starting on different pitches. This builds your relative pitch awareness. 5, 3, 4, 2, 6, 7, Once a single line feels comfortable, find some Bach chorales or traditional 4-part hymns and start shifting that idea of scale degree recognition from the melody to the root of the chord, and play the chorale while naming the chords. The aim is to train your brain to always be comprehending what it hears and hearing what it sees. Now to work on your real ear, the one that hears what your ensemble are actually singing and playing, sends that information to your brain and helps you decide what needs to be worked on in rehearsal. Here are a few ideas. Try and find ways to do them that don't require you to conduct, because the more we're moving our bodies, the less energy we send to our brain and our ears for listening. Perhaps try counting in for 1 bar and then get the musicians to lead themselves, Or if that's too tricky for your group, ask someone in the ensemble, perhaps a percussionist, to keep the beat for you. Ask the ensemble to play or sing an ordinary major or minor chord. G major is good for strings, B flat is good for brass ensembles. You might need to remind less advanced players which notes are in that triad so that they can pick one to play. Once you feel like they have a nice balanced chord, ask them to play it for 4 counts with no vibrato, then 4 counts with extreme vibrato. Keep this oscillation going for a while and listen with your eyes closed, perhaps encourage them to do the same. If they are younger musicians, you could pause at this point and ask them to explain how it feels and sounds to do the 2 extremes, what changes in their bodies, what changes in their ears, which instruments in the room do they become more aware of at either end of the vibrato spectrum that you've made. Once you really have them making the most extreme contrast to vibrato that they can, ask them to take 8 counts to go gradually from one extreme to the other as an ensemble. Really challenge them to listen to the rates of vibrato they hear around the room and try to match each other. Take the time to notice who in the room vibrates faster than the people around them. What effect does it have on intonation, balance, and timbre? Ask for their feedback if they're the sort of group who will be comfortable speaking in front of each other. Finally, repeat the exercise for a final time, but asking them to hone their ears into one particular player and copy their rate of vibrato. This sort of exercise is really flexible and sort of limited only by your creativity. You can use it to work on fine gradations of articulation with the group, and you can even use it to play around with working on intonation, doing something like oscillating between a major and minor third in the middle of a triad so they can really hear the differences in intonation. Now a few suggestions to sharpen your ears while you're actually rehearsing the repertoire. Firstly, a reminder that the more the ensemble can take responsibility for the tempo, the less work you need to be doing physically and the more you can actually stop and really listen deeply. How would you describe the rate of crescendo or decrescendo in any given phrase? Does it rise in volume at a constant rate of incline? Or does the crescendo take more of an exponential shape, getting louder more quickly towards the peak? Or is there a cluttered mix of approaches through the room? Once you're clear what they're actually doing, communicate the ideal, working from the score, and work on achieving it with them. In simple diatonic passages, can you name the harmonic progression in your head as they play? Make a mental note of the passages that you can't and go through them carefully in your own time so that you're really clear what is happening. If a section plays something melodic or strikingly textural, ask them to play it on their own so that you can really hear it. Close your eyes if you need to and try not to conduct too much, but really listen to how they're playing. Is the rate of vibrato even? If it's a string passage, can you hear or see any bow speed surges or variations in where the bow is placed on the string? Check whether anyone is blurring the clarity of slurred versus articulated notes, louder or softer than their colleagues, lifting off the end of the phrase slightly sooner than everyone else, or articulating accents differently. Bring any issues you hear to the group's attention, say what you would prefer, and ask them to do that passage again, paying particular attention to the issue in question. My final 3 big pieces of advice that I hope you can take away are: keep trying to balance that ideal inner sound with the actual one happening in front of you. It's the critical comparison of the two that enables us to do our job. Remember to take the time to listen deeply to small details, and always try to guide and train your musicians to listen as deeply as you do.